The pen felt unnaturally heavy in my hand as Linda placed the clipboard in front of me, her smile too bright, too eager. Tommy stood near the doorway, his 16-year-old frame rigid with tension I couldn't quite understand. When his mother turned to adjust the curtains, flooding the pristine office with afternoon sunlight, my grandson leaned close enough that I felt his breath against my ear. 3 words, barely audible, delivered with an urgency that made my blood run cold. "Don't sign anything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Grandpa." Then he straightened, face carefully neutral, as if he'd merely been checking the time over my shoulder. That whisper changed everything. 30 minutes later, I uncovered a betrayal so calculated, so meticulously planned by my own daughter and son-in-law, that it would send both of them to prison and tear our family apart forever. What I'm about to tell you will make you question everyone you trust. The coffee maker sputtered its final gurgling complaint, filling my kitchen with the familiar aroma that Dorothy used to say smelled like morning hope. 2 years since her passing, and I still brewed a full pot every day, old habits clinging to me like shadows that refused to fade with the light. I poured exactly half into my chipped mug, the one Tommy had painted for me in 3rd grade art class, complete with a lopsided heart and the words "World's Best Grandpa" in uneven red letters. The other half would cool untouched, eventually finding its way down the drain after lunch, a daily ritual of remembrance for the woman who'd shared my mornings for 47 years. Maple Street stretched quiet beyond my kitchen window, the kind of peaceful that used to comfort me but now just amplified the silence pressing against my eardrums. The Hendersons next door had their sprinkler going despite yesterday's rain. George Martinez across the street was already tinkering under the hood of that ancient Buick he swore he'd restore someday. Normal people doing normal things while I rattled around this ranch house like a marble in an empty can. Dorothy's reading glasses still sat on the side table next to her favorite chair, marking a page in a mystery novel she'd never finish. I couldn't bring myself to move them. Some mornings I'd wake up and forget she was gone, calling out to ask if she wanted eggs or pancakes, my voice echoing back to me like a cruel reminder. The house remembered her better than I did sometimes. Her lavender sachets in the linen closet, her gardening gloves on the back porch, her careful handwriting on recipe cards I'd never learned to follow properly. Bennett & Sons Hardware had been my salvation these past 2 years. 3 locations across Ohio, built from nothing over 4 decades of early mornings and late nights, Dorothy keeping the books while I learned to tell the difference between a Phillips head and a flathead by touch alone. The business gave me purpose when grief tried to swallow me whole. My employees had become family, asking about my health, bringing me casseroles they claimed were from old recipes but probably came from the deli section at Kroger. I appreciated the lie. Linda used to work summers at the Riverside location when she was Tommy's age, restocking shelves and learning the cash register, back before she decided that retail work was beneath her station. She'd married Brian Crawford fresh out of college, drawn to his MBA and his promises of country club memberships and European vacations. I tried to like him, really tried, but there was something rehearsed about Brian's charm, like he'd learned how to smile from watching game show hosts. Dorothy had shared my reservations but kept them quiet, not wanting to lose our daughter to pride or stubbornness. The phone's ring cut through my reminiscing like a blade. I set down my coffee and reached for the wall-mounted receiver, squinting at the caller ID through the reading glasses I kept forgetting I needed. Linda's name glowed on the small screen. My heart performed that familiar little jump it always did when she called. Despite everything, despite the growing distance between us since Dorothy's funeral, she was still my little girl. The one I'd taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose tears I'd dried after her first heartbreak. Dad, her voice carried forced brightness that immediately put me on alert. I've got wonderful news. Brian and I have been researching options, and we found the perfect place for you. Perfect place? I set my mug down carefully, condensation rings spreading on the Formica counter. I've got a perfect place. It's called my home. Linda's laugh sounded like breaking glass. Dad, be serious. You're 72 years old, living alone in that big house. What if you fall? What if something happens and nobody finds you for days? We worry constantly. This house is 900 square feet. It's not exactly a mansion. And I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. That's what everyone thinks until they're not. Listen, we've scheduled a tour this afternoon at Sunset Meadows. It's beautiful, Dad. Really top-notch. Independent living with support services if you need them. They have activities, social programs, and a dining room where you won't have to cook for yourself anymore. My grip tightened on the receiver. I didn't ask for this, Linda. I know, but sometimes family has to make difficult decisions. Brian and I discussed it extensively, and we think this is what's best. Dr. Patterson agrees. You talked to my doctor? Heat crept up my neck, anger mixing with confusion. That's a violation of privacy. Dad, don't be dramatic. We're listed as your emergency contacts. Dr. Patterson shares our concerns about your cognitive function. There have been incidents. What incidents? I demanded, mind racing through recent weeks, finding nothing alarming. I run 3 successful businesses. My books balance. My employees respect me. What exactly has you convinced I'm losing my mind? The pharmacy called us 3 weeks ago. You tried to pick up Dorothy's prescriptions. The silence that followed felt accusatory. You don't remember that, do you? I remembered walking into Myers Pharmacy, the fluorescent lights too bright, approaching the counter with a vague sense I'd forgotten something important. Had I asked for Dorothy's medications? The memory felt slippery, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. That was just confusion. A momentary lapse. I'd been thinking about her and got mixed up. Exactly, Linda said gently, victory creeping into her tone. These lapses concern us. The tour is at 2 o'clock. Brian and I will pick you up at 1:30. Tommy's coming too. He specifically asked to be there. Said he wanted to make sure Grandpa was taken care of properly. The mention of Tommy softened something in my chest. My grandson had always been different from his parents, quieter, more thoughtful. He'd spent last summer working at my Akron location, sorting inventory and learning the business with genuine interest his mother had never shown. We'd talked about him maybe taking over someday, building something together the way Dorothy and I had. Fine, I heard myself saying, though every instinct screamed resistance. But I'm not promising anything. Just a tour. That's all we're asking, Linda replied, relief evident in her voice. Just keep an open mind. We love you, Dad. We want what's best for you. After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen feeling suddenly uncertain about everything. The coffee in my mug had gone lukewarm. Dorothy's glasses watched me from the living room. The house seemed larger somehow, emptier, the silence pressing closer. Was Linda right? Were there other incidents I'd forgotten? The pharmacy situation nagged at me, a gap in memory that felt wrong but possible. I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. Gray hair thinning at the crown, lines carved deep around eyes that Dorothy used to say were kind. The face staring back looked older than I felt inside. 72 wasn't ancient, but it wasn't young either. How many good years did I have left? How long before I really couldn't manage alone? The morning dragged past with agonizing slowness. I tried to focus on paperwork from the stores, purchase orders, and inventory reports, but the numbers kept blurring together. Finally, I showered and dressed in the khakis and polo shirt that had become my uniform, clothes Dorothy had carefully selected because she claimed they made me look distinguished rather than elderly. At precisely 1:30, Brian's silver Lexus pulled into my driveway, gleaming in the afternoon sun like a promise of prosperity. Linda emerged first, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage used to be. Brian followed, all perfect teeth and practiced handshake, his cologne arriving 3 seconds before he did. Tommy climbed out last, tall and gangly in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, his dark hair falling into eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine. Ready for this adventure, Hal? Brian clapped my shoulder with enthusiasm that felt rehearsed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You're going to love Sunset Meadows. Top-rated facility in the state. We wouldn't settle for anything less than the best for family. The drive to the facility took 20 minutes, Linda filling the silence with nervous chatter about amenities and programs while Brian navigated traffic with aggressive precision. Tommy sat beside me in the back seat, staring out the window, his jaw tight with tension I couldn't interpret. When I tried to catch his eye, he looked away quickly, fingers drumming an anxious rhythm against his knee. Sunset Meadows rose before us like a luxury resort, all brick and glass and perfectly manicured lawns that probably required a team of gardeners. The circular drive curved past a fountain where water danced in choreographed patterns. Expensive cars filled the visitor parking lot. This wasn't a retirement home. This was where wealthy people went to pretend aging happened with dignity and discretion. Beautiful, isn't it? Linda's voice held something I couldn't quite identify. Triumph? Relief? We've already filled out most of the preliminary paperwork. Today's just the tour and finalizing details. Finalizing what details? I asked, unease creeping up my spine like cold fingers. Just standard stuff, Brian assured me, guiding me through automatic doors that whisked open with mechanical efficiency. Medical history, insurance information, financial arrangements. Nothing to worry about. The lobby smelled of fresh flowers and expensive carpet cleaner. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. A woman in professional attire approached with a smile that had been perfected through countless orientations, her name tag reading Karen, Senior Living Consultant. Mr. Bennett, such a pleasure to meet you. Your family speaks so highly of their plans for your future here. Tommy hung back near the entrance, hands shoved deep in his pockets, watching everything with eyes that seemed older than 16. Something in his expression made me pause, some warning I couldn't quite read. But Linda's hand on my elbow guided me forward, and Karen's practiced monologue about amenities and care levels washed over me like a tide I couldn't resist. The tour wound through common areas that looked like hotel lobbies, past dining rooms with white tablecloths and fresh flowers, through a library that smelled of leather and old paper. Everything appeared perfect, sanitized, designed to make aging look like a vacation rather than a surrender. Karen explained meal plans and activity schedules while Brian asked pointed questions about costs and contracts that seemed oddly specific for someone just exploring options. Finally, we arrived at what Karen called the consultation suite, a private office with a mahogany desk and chairs that probably cost more than my living room furniture. Large windows overlooked gardens where elderly residents moved slowly along paved paths, some with walkers, others in wheelchairs pushed by staff in cheerful scrubs. Now, Karen settled behind the desk with practiced efficiency, pulling a leather folder from a drawer. Let's discuss the particulars of Mr. Bennett's transition. We've prepared the necessary documentation based on the information your daughter and son-in-law provided. She opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers easily an inch thick, tabs marking various sections with clinical efficiency. Linda and Brian exchanged a glance I couldn't quite interpret. Tommy moved closer to where I sat, positioning himself slightly behind my chair, close enough that I could hear his breathing, quick and shallow with what might have been anxiety. This seems premature, I said slowly, heart beginning to pound with instinctive alarm. I thought today was just a tour. Oh, absolutely, Karen's smile never wavered. But we've found that families appreciate having everything ready. No pressure, of course. Let's just review the documents so you understand what moving forward would entail. She began explaining terms and conditions, her voice a professional drone that made my head swim. Something about monthly fees and care levels and financial responsibilities. Brian leaned forward, adding commentary that sounded helpful but felt controlling. Linda kept her hand on my arm, squeezing gently whenever I seemed to hesitate. Karen slid the first document toward me, a pen appearing in her hand like a magician's trick. This initial form simply acknowledges you've received our information packet and toured the facility. Standard procedure. I reached for the pen, some part of me wanting to please my daughter, to prove I wasn't the confused old man they seemed to think I was becoming. My fingers closed around the smooth metal barrel. the document's small print blurred slightly despite my reading glasses. That's when Tommy moved. He didn't make a sound, didn't call attention to himself, just leaned down as if adjusting my chair, bringing his mouth close to my ear. 3 words, delivered in an urgent whisper that made every hair on my neck stand at attention. "Don't sign anything, Grandpa." Then he straightened, face carefully blank, as if he'd done nothing more significant than check the time. But those 3 words detonated in my brain like a bomb, scattering the fog of confusion and compliance that had been settling over me. I set the pen down slowly, my hand suddenly steady with crystallizing suspicion. "Actually," I said, voice firm despite the hammering of my heart, "I'd like to take these documents home. Review them with my attorney before signing anything." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Karen's smile faltered for just an instant. Brian's hand clenched on the chair arm. Linda's grip on my elbow tightened almost painfully. "Dad, there's no need for that." Linda's voice carried an edge of desperation. "This is just preliminary paperwork. Nothing binding. Then it won't matter if I have Philip Chen look it over first." I met her eyes directly, seeing something flicker there that might have been panic. "I don't sign business documents without legal review. Why would this be different?" The silence that followed felt suffocating. Tommy remained motionless behind me, and I could feel the tension radiating from his teenage frame. Whatever he knew, whatever had prompted that whispered warning, I was about to find out why my own daughter had just tried to rush me into signing documents she claimed were meaningless. And in that moment, staring at the stack of papers with their innocent-looking tabs and official seals, I realized I'd been walking into a trap carefully baited with concern and family obligation. The question was what exactly those documents contained, and why Tommy felt compelled to save me from my own daughter. Brian recovered first, his practiced charm sliding back into place like a mask secured with Velcro. "Of course, Hal. Absolutely reasonable. We completely understand wanting your attorney to review everything." He stood smoothly, gesturing toward the door with manufactured casualness. "Why don't we grab some coffee in the dining room while Karen puts together a packet you can take home?" Linda's fingers released my elbow, leaving indentations I could feel through my shirt sleeve. Her smile looked painted on, eyes darting between her husband and the documents spread across Karen's desk like evidence at a crime scene. "Sure, Dad. Whatever makes you comfortable. We're not trying to pressure you." Karen began gathering papers with mechanical efficiency, her professional demeanor never cracking despite the obvious tension crackling through the air like static electricity. "I'll prepare a complete information package. Take all the time you need to review with counsel." Tommy moved toward the door ahead of us, his shoulders relaxing incrementally now that I'd refused to sign. In the hallway, while Brian and Linda walked several paces ahead discussing something in urgent whispers, my grandson slowed his pace to match mine. His hand brushed against my arm, a deliberate touch, and when I glanced at him, he tilted his head almost imperceptibly toward the restroom we were passing. "I need to use the facilities," I announced, loudly enough for Linda and Brian to hear. "We'll wait in the dining room," Linda called back without turning, her voice strained. "Take your time." The men's room smelled of industrial cleaner and air freshener, all gleaming tile and motion sensor faucets that belonged in airports. I pushed through the door, expecting privacy, but Tommy followed me inside, checking the stalls quickly before positioning himself near the entrance like a sentry. "Grandpa, we don't have much time." His voice came out low and urgent, nothing like his usual teenage drawl. "Those papers Mom tried to get you to sign, they're not what she said they were." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What do you mean?" Tommy pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers flying across the screen with the fluency of his generation. 3 nights ago, I couldn't sleep. Went downstairs for water and heard them in Dad's office. The door was cracked open, and they were talking about you. About the stores. About money." He turned the phone toward me, showing a voice recording file timestamped at 2:17 in the morning 3 days prior. I hit record before I really understood what I was hearing. "You need to listen to this." Tommy pressed play, volume low but audible in the tiled bathroom. Brian's voice emerged first, clipped and businesslike. The documents are perfect. Once he signs the initial intake form, the power of attorney activates automatically. He won't even realize what he's agreed to. Linda's response carried equal parts anxiety and determination. You're sure Dr. Patterson's letter will hold up? If anyone questions Harold's mental capacity? It's airtight, Brian assured her. We paid Patterson $15,000 for that assessment. He documented 3 incidents of confusion and memory loss, recommended immediate assisted living for patient safety. Any lawyer challenging it would have to prove the incidents didn't happen. But they didn't happen, Linda said, her voice small. We made them up. Doesn't matter. Tommy's phone captured every damning word. Patterson's professional opinion, combined with Harold voluntarily touring the facility and signing admission paperwork, creates a legal framework for transferring assets. Once we have power of attorney, we liquidate the hardware stores, sell the properties, move everything into accounts he can't access. The recording continued, laying out a conspiracy so calculated it made my vision blur. They'd researched my business assets down to the penny. Contacted commercial real estate brokers about selling the store locations. Even lined up buyers for inventory. All of it contingent on those documents Karen had placed in front of me with such professional courtesy. What about Tommy? Linda's voice cracked slightly. He's going to know something's wrong. Brian's laugh held no warmth. Tommy's 16. What's he going to do? By the time he figures anything out, it'll be done. Besides, he needs to learn that family takes care of family. Harold's stores are our inheritance. We're just claiming it a few years early. The recording ended, leaving silence that pressed against my eardrums like physical weight. Tommy's face was pale, his jaw clenched so tight I could see muscles jumping beneath teenage skin. That's my parents, he whispered. That's what they were planning to do to you. I gripped the sink counter, legs suddenly unsteady. The white porcelain felt cold and solid, the only real thing in a world that had just tilted sideways. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't know what to do. His voice broke slightly, revealing the scared kid beneath his urgent warning. They're my parents, Grandpa. I kept thinking maybe I misunderstood, maybe there was some explanation. But then today, when Mom said we were going to Sunset Meadows, I knew. I knew they were really going to do it. The bathroom door swung open suddenly, making us both jump. An elderly man shuffled in, nodded politely, and headed toward the stalls. Tommy deleted the recording from his screen but looked at me meaningfully. I've got backups. 3 different places they can't access. We need to leave, I said quietly. Right now. They'll know something's wrong if you bolt. Tommy's tactical thinking surprised me. You need to play along a little longer. Act like everything's fine. Then tonight, after they drop you off, you call your lawyer. Get ahead of this before they can make another move. The old man flushed and moved to wash his hands, humming tunelessly. Tommy and I stood in tense silence, pretending to be nothing more than grandfather and grandson chatting during a restroom break. When the man finally left, I turned to face Tommy fully. Why are you doing this? You're risking your relationship with your parents. His eyes met mine directly, and I saw Dorothy in his expression, that same unflinching integrity she possessed. Because it's wrong, Grandpa. Because you and Grandma built those stores from nothing, and you deserve to decide what happens to them. Because my parents are so desperate for money they've forgotten how to be decent people. What happened to them? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Why are they this desperate? Tommy glanced toward the door, ensuring our continued privacy. Dad's investment firm collapsed 18 months ago. Something about bad real estate deals and clients pulling out. They've been living on credit cards and loans ever since, trying to maintain appearances. The house in Thornhill Estates? They're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The Lexus? Leased, and they're about to lose it. They owe over $400,000 to various creditors. The numbers hit me like physical blows. 400,000. No wonder they'd crafted such an elaborate scheme. My hardware stores and properties weren't just convenient targets. They were Linda and Brian's only hope of avoiding complete financial collapse. "We should get back," Tommy said reluctantly. "They'll start wondering what's taking so long." The walk to the dining room felt surreal, like moving through water. Everything looked normal, expensive artwork on walls, soft music from hidden speakers, but I was seeing it all through new understanding. This wasn't a care facility tour. This was a crime scene where I'd almost become the victim. Linda and Brian sat at a corner table, heads bent together in urgent conversation that stopped abruptly when they spotted us approaching. Linda's smile returned, but it looked strained now that I knew what it concealed. "Everything okay, Dad?" "Fine," I replied, settling into a chair across from them. "Just needed a moment." Karen appeared with a thick manila envelope, her professional warmth turned up like a dimmer switch. "All your materials, Mr. Bennett. Take as much time as you need reviewing everything. We're here whenever you're ready to move forward." I accepted the envelope, feeling its weight, knowing it contained documents designed to strip me of everything Dorothy and I had built together. "Thank you. I'll be in touch." The drive back to my house passed in strained silence, Brian making occasional comments about traffic while Linda stared out the window. Tommy sat beside me again, his presence a solid comfort, the only person in this car who hadn't tried to destroy my life for financial gain. When we pulled into my driveway, Linda finally turned to face me. "So, what did you think?" "Honestly? It's impressive," I said carefully. "A lot to consider. I need to discuss it with Philip before making any decisions." Brian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Hal, I don't think you fully appreciate the urgency here. Your cognitive issues are only going to worsen. Waiting could mean losing the opportunity for quality care. I've managed fine for 72 years. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "A few more days won't make much difference." Tommy climbed out with me, grabbing the envelope from my lap. "I'll help you inside with this, Grandpa." His deliberate emphasis on the last word felt like a small rebellion against his parents' scheme. At my front door, Linda leaned out the car window. "Call me after you talk to Philip, okay? We really do want what's best for you, Dad." "I know you do," I replied, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Inside my house, Tommy set the envelope on my kitchen table like it might detonate. "You need to call Mr. Chen right now. Tonight. Don't wait." "I will." My voice came out rougher than intended. "Tommy, what you did today, warning me, showing me that recording, it took real courage." He shrugged, teenage awkwardness returning briefly. "Grandma Dorothy used to say doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always right. I figure she'd want me to protect you." The mention of Dorothy made my throat tighten. She'd have been proud of him, proud of his integrity in the face of family pressure and personal cost. "Your parents are going to know you warned me eventually." "I know." His jaw set with determination beyond his years. "I've been saving money from my summer job. If they kick me out, I'll figure something out." The casual acceptance of potential homelessness from his own parents broke something in my chest. "You're not getting kicked out. If it comes to that, you'll stay here." After Tommy left, I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope unopened before me, staring at Dorothy's reading glasses on the side table. What would she do in this situation? Dorothy, who'd always seen the best in people but never tolerated cruelty or deception. I pulled Philip Chen's business card from my wallet, fingers trembling slightly as I dialed his cell phone. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying concern even before I explained anything. "Harold? Everything all right? You never call this late." "Philip, I need you to come to my house right now. Tonight. And I need you to bring someone who understands elder law and financial fraud." There was a beat of silence, then his voice sharpened with alert professionalism. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't open any envelopes, don't sign anything, and don't talk to anyone until I arrive. Already ahead of you on all counts." While waiting for Philip, I walked through my house, seeing it with new appreciation. the modest ranch that Linda had dismissed as too large for one person, the worn furniture that held 40 years of memories, the kitchen where Dorothy and I had shared morning coffee and evening wine, and everything in between. They'd wanted to take this from me. Not just the business, not just the money, but my home, my independence, my right to decide my own future. Dorothy's photograph smiled at me from the mantel, her eyes holding that look she got when she knew I was about to do something difficult but necessary. I picked up the frame, tracing the outline of her face with one finger. I'm going to fight them, Dot. Our daughter tried to steal everything we built, and I'm going to make sure she faces consequences. The doorbell rang precisely 28 minutes after my call to Philip. He stood on my porch with a woman in her 50s, both carrying briefcases that suggested serious legal business. Harold, Philip gripped my hand firmly. This is Sandra Morrison, best elder law attorney in Ohio. Whatever's happening, we'll handle it. Over coffee at my kitchen table, I played Tommy's recording on speakerphone. Both attorneys listened with increasingly grim expressions, Sandra taking notes in rapid shorthand. When Brian's voice explained paying Dr. Patterson for a fraudulent medical assessment, Philip's face darkened with anger I'd rarely seen. This is criminal conspiracy, he said flatly. Fraud, forgery if they falsified medical documents, attempted theft, and potentially elder abuse. Your daughter and son-in-law are looking at serious prison time. Sandra opened the manila envelope I'd brought from Sunset Meadows, spreading documents across my table with clinical efficiency. She read quickly, occasionally making notations, her expression growing more severe with each page. This is even worse than standard power of attorney fraud. Look at paragraph 7, subsection 3. She turned the document toward Philip and me, pointing to dense legal language I couldn't quite parse. This clause grants them immediate access to all financial accounts, with authorization to liquidate assets without your knowledge or consent. And here, paragraph 12, you waive all rights to contest their decisions based on the medical assessment declaring you mentally incompetent. But I never got a real medical assessment, I protested. Tommy said they paid Dr. Patterson to fabricate one. Doesn't matter legally if you'd sign this. Sandra's finger tapped the paper with emphasis. Your signature on the admission documents, combined with Patterson's letter in your medical file, would create a legal presumption of incapacity. Fighting it would require extensive litigation, during which they'd have full control of your assets. So if I'd signed today, I would have lost everything immediately. Within 48 hours. Philip's voice carried controlled fury. They could have emptied your accounts, sold your properties, liquidated inventory, all before you even realized what happened. The three of us sat in silence, the full scope of Linda and Brian's betrayal settling over us like ash. My own daughter had been willing to fabricate medical conditions, bribe doctors, and commit fraud to steal my life's work. The grief hit harder than the anger, a profound sadness that the little girl I'd raised could become someone capable of such calculated cruelty. What do we do now? I asked finally. Sandra and Philip exchanged glances, some wordless communication passing between experienced attorneys. We have several options, Sandra began carefully. We could confront them privately, attempt to resolve this without legal action. Or we could take this evidence to the authorities and let criminal prosecution proceed. What would Dorothy want? Philip asked gently, knowing he'd hit the question that mattered most. I thought about my wife's unwavering sense of right and wrong, her belief that consequences taught better lessons than forgiveness without accountability. She'd want justice. Not revenge, but consequences that might actually change them. And she'd want Tommy protected from retaliation. Then we go to the police, Sandra said decisively. But first, we need to secure your assets, change account access, remove Linda and Brian from all emergency contacts and legal authorizations. We make you legally bulletproof before they realize their plan has failed. How long will that take? If we work through the night? Everything can be filed by morning. Sandra was already pulling forms from her briefcase. By the time your daughter realizes you didn't sign those documents, every door they were counting on will be locked and deadbolt. The three of us worked until nearly 3 in the morning, signing genuine legal documents that protected rather than exploited, changing passwords and access codes, revoking old authorizations that I'd granted back when I still trusted my daughter. Philip made calls to banks and brokerage houses, invoking emergency protocols. Sandra drafted restraining orders and contacted the state medical board about Dr. Patterson's fraudulent assessment. When they finally left, promising to return at 9 for our police station appointment, I sat alone in my kitchen watching dawn break over Maple Street. In 12 hours, my daughter and son-in-law would be arrested. Tommy would be safe but traumatized. My family would be destroyed, but my integrity and independence would remain intact. Dorothy's photograph caught the morning light, and I could almost hear her voice. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices, Hal. Even when those people are your children. I picked up Tommy's painted mug, the one with the crooked heart and uneven letters, and poured fresh coffee. Today would change everything. But unlike yesterday, when I'd almost walked blindly into betrayal, today I'd walk into the police station with eyes wide open and truth on my side. The phone rang at 7:30, Linda's name glowing on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail, listening as her voice filled my kitchen with false concern. "Dad, just checking in. Have you had a chance to review those documents? Call me back when you get this. We really need to move forward soon." Soon, I thought, setting down my coffee. Soon you'll understand that stealing from family has consequences. Soon you'll learn that your father isn't the confused old man you needed me to be. Soon everything would burn down. But from ashes, sometimes, integrity could be rebuilt. The Riverside Police Department occupied a squat brick building on 4th Street, sandwiched between the municipal courthouse and a bail bonds office that had seen better decades. Philip held the door while Sandra carried her briefcase stuffed with evidence, and I followed them into fluorescent-lit chaos that smelled of burnt coffee and institutional cleaning products. A drunk slept it off on a bench near the entrance. 2 officers processed paperwork at desks cluttered with files and styrofoam cups. The whole place hummed with the mundane machinery of law enforcement grinding through another Thursday morning. Detective Sarah Moreno met us in the lobby, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and graying temples that suggested she'd seen enough family betrayals to fill several filing cabinets. She shook hands with professional firmness, her grip suggesting someone who didn't waste time on pleasantries when crimes needed solving. "Mr. Bennett, I've reviewed the preliminary materials your attorneys forwarded. This is one of the most elaborate elder fraud schemes I've encountered. Let's talk in interview room 2. The interview room matched every police procedural I'd ever watched, gray walls and a metal table bolted to the floor, a mirror that probably wasn't really a mirror on one wall. Sarah set up a recording device with practiced efficiency while Sandra arranged documents in neat stacks, each pile representing another layer of Linda and Brian's conspiracy. Philip sat beside me, his presence solid and reassuring, the friend who'd handled my legal affairs for 20 years now witnessing the ugliest moment of my family history. "Walk me through yesterday's events," Sarah instructed, her pen poised over a legal pad. "Start from when your daughter first contacted you about the facility tour." I recounted everything, my voice steady despite the weight of what I was describing. Linda's phone call, the manufactured urgency, Tommy's whispered warning, the documents designed to strip my autonomy and assets. Sarah took notes in rapid shorthand, occasionally stopping me to clarify details or ask about specific timing. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught flickers of anger when I described how they'd tried to rush me into signing while my grandson stood helpless, caught between family loyalty and moral obligation. "And you have the recording your grandson made?" Sarah's attention sharpened when we reached that part of the narrative. Tommy had sent the audio file to Sandra's secure server overnight. She pulled out her laptop and played it through external speakers, the sound quality tinny but every word devastatingly clear. Brian's voice filled the interview room, laying out their conspiracy with businesslike precision. The plan to fabricate medical assessments, the bribes to Dr. Patterson, the timeline for liquidating my assets before I could react or seek legal intervention. Sarah's pen stopped moving. She sat back in her chair, the recording still playing, and her professional mask slipped enough to reveal genuine disgust. "How old is your grandson?" 16, I replied, pride mixing with sadness in my chest. He risked everything to protect me. He's a witness we'll need to interview, but given his age and the fact that these are his parents, we'll handle it carefully. Sarah made additional notes. The recording alone is sufficient for conspiracy charges, but combined with the fraudulent documents and Dr. Patterson's involvement, we're looking at multiple felonies. Elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, forgery if Patterson falsified medical records, possibly extortion depending on what other pressure tactics they used. What kind of sentences are we discussing? Philip asked the question I'd been afraid to voice. Sarah consulted a reference guide she'd pulled from a desk drawer. Ohio Revised Code is very clear on elder fraud. Given the sophistication of the scheme and the amount involved, your daughter and son-in-law are each looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. Dr. Patterson, if we can prove he knowingly falsified medical documents for payment, could face additional charges including medical fraud and professional misconduct. He'll lose his license permanently and likely serve concurrent time. The numbers felt abstract, impossible to connect with the little girl I'd taught to ride a bicycle, who'd climbed into my lap for bedtime stories, who'd cried at her mother's funeral with what I believed was genuine grief. 5 to 10 years. Linda would be in her 50s when she got out, Brian approaching 60, their lives permanently marked by felony convictions and destroyed reputations. Mr. Bennett, Sarah's voice gentled slightly. I need to ask if you want to proceed with criminal charges. Sometimes families prefer to handle these situations privately, through civil litigation or mediation. I thought about Dorothy, about her unwavering belief that real love sometimes meant allowing people to face consequences. I thought about Tommy, who'd found the courage to expose his own parents because their actions were wrong. I thought about other elderly people who might fall victim to similar schemes if Linda and Brian faced no accountability. I want to proceed, I said firmly. What they did was criminal. What they planned to do to me, they could do to someone else's parent or grandparent. Someone without a grandson brave enough to intervene. Sandra nodded approvingly while Philip squeezed my shoulder in silent support. Sarah stood, collecting her notes and the evidence we'd provided. I'll coordinate with the prosecutor's office and obtain arrest warrants. Given the flight risk and the severity of the charges, I'm recommending no bail initially. We'll execute the warrants this afternoon. This afternoon? The reality hit me like cold water. In a few hours, police would arrive at Linda's house in Thornhill Estates, would place handcuffs on my daughter's wrists, would read her Miranda rights while neighbors watched through expensive curtains. Better to move quickly, Sarah explained, reading my expression accurately. If they suspect you've uncovered their plan, they might attempt to flee or destroy evidence. We've already contacted Dr. Patterson's office. State medical investigators will be executing a search warrant simultaneously. What about Tommy? The question burst out before I could stop it. He lives with them. What happens to him when you arrest his parents? Sandra had anticipated this concern. We've already filed emergency paperwork naming you as temporary guardian. Given Tommy's age and his role in exposing the fraud, family court will likely approve it immediately. He can stay with you until more permanent arrangements are made. The thought of Tommy living in my modest ranch, sleeping in the guest room that still held some of Linda's childhood furniture, felt both right and heartbreaking. A 16-year-old shouldn't have to choose between his parents and his grandfather, shouldn't have to sacrifice his home because he'd done the right thing. We left the police station with the machinery of justice grinding into motion behind us. Sarah promised to call after the arrests were executed. Sandra needed to file additional paperwork with family court. Philip walked me to his car, both of us silent under gray October skies that threatened rain. How are you holding up? He asked once we were inside, heater fighting against autumn chill. I don't know, I admitted, staring at Riverside's familiar streets rolling past. Part of me feels relieved that I caught them before they succeeded. Part of me wishes I'd never found out, could have gone on believing my daughter loved me for something other than my bank account. Philip navigated traffic with careful attention, giving me space to process. Dorothy would be proud of how you're handling this. She always said you had more steel in your spine than you gave yourself credit for. The mention of my wife made tears sting unexpectedly. She would have been devastated. Linda was her whole world when she was little. We used to joke that we'd created a perfect human being. You did create someone wonderful, Philip said quietly. But somewhere along the way, Linda made choices that led her away from the values you taught. That's on her, Hal. Not you or Dorothy. We drove to my house, where Philip helped me change all the locks as an additional precaution. While he installed new deadbolts, I walked through rooms that would soon house my grandson, thinking about how to make Tommy feel welcome rather than exiled. The guest room needed fresh sheets, maybe some posters if he wanted them. The refrigerator needed restocking with food teenagers actually ate rather than my old man staples of bran cereal and prune juice. Philip finished the last lock and handed me 3 shiny new keys. No one gets in without your permission now. Not even family. Especially not family. After he left, promising to return once we heard from Sarah, I sat in my kitchen with a fresh pot of coffee and Dorothy's photograph. The house felt different now, no longer a shrine to the past but potentially a sanctuary for the future. Tommy would need stability, routine, someone to remind him that not all adults betrayed trust or prioritized money over integrity. My phone rang at 2:17, Sarah's number glowing on the screen. Mr. Bennett, warrants have been executed. Your daughter and son-in-law are in custody, both arrested without incident at their residence. Dr. Patterson was apprehended at his office. All 3 are being processed and will be arraigned tomorrow morning. How did Linda react? I couldn't help asking, some masochistic part of me needing to know. Sarah paused, probably debating how much to share. She was shocked, claimed this was all a misunderstanding. She asked to speak with you multiple times during processing. I told her you'd retain counsel and all communication needed to go through your attorney. And Tommy? Officer Walsh transported him to your residence. He should arrive in approximately 10 minutes. We retrieved some of his belongings, but he may need to go back for additional items once the scene is released. Thank you, Detective. The words felt inadequate for everything Sarah had done, the speed and professionalism she brought to dismantling my daughter's conspiracy. Mr. Bennett, one more thing. Sarah's voice carried something I couldn't quite identify. Your grandson is remarkable. During the interview, he was composed, clear-headed, and unwavering in his testimony despite the obvious emotional toll. He's got a strong moral compass. You should be very proud. After disconnecting, I stood at my front window watching for Officer Walsh's cruiser. Rain had started falling, light October drizzle that turned streets shiny and made streetlights blur. When the police car pulled up, Tommy emerged from the back seat carrying a duffel bag in his backpack, looking small and lost despite his teenage height. I opened the door before he reached it, and the expression on his face nearly broke me. Relief and grief and exhaustion all mixed together, the look of someone who'd done something impossibly difficult and was only now allowing himself to feel the consequences. Grandpa, his voice cracked on the word. They arrested my parents. I saw them put handcuffs on my mom. I know, I pulled him inside, into the warmth and safety of a home that was now his refuge. You did the right thing, Tommy. Even when the right thing is the hardest thing. He set his bags down in the entryway and just stood there, this tall boy who was trying so hard to be strong, and I watched his composure finally shatter. The tears came hard and fast, great shaking sobs that spoke of trauma and loss and the terrible price of integrity. I held him while he cried, this grandson who'd sacrificed his family to save mine, who'd chosen morality over comfort, who'd become more of an adult than his parents had managed. What's going to happen to them? Tommy asked eventually, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I told him honestly, because he deserved truth rather than comfort. They'll face trial. If convicted, they'll go to prison. Their lives as they knew them are over. And me? Where do I go? You stay here, I said firmly. For as long as you need. This is your home now, Tommy. Not a temporary stop, not until something better comes along. You're home. He pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve in a gesture so achingly young it made my chest tight. What about school? My friends? Everything's in Thornhill Estates. We'll figure it out, I promised, guiding him toward the guest room where I'd already put fresh sheets on the bed. You can transfer to Riverside High, or we can arrange transportation if you want to stay at your current school. Whatever you need to maintain some normalcy. Tommy looked around the guest room, taking in the old furniture and faded wallpaper, such a stark contrast to his designer bedroom in Thornhill Estates. This was Mom's room when she was a kid, wasn't it? The twin bed with the carved headboard, the dresser with one sticky drawer, the window seat where Dorothy used to read to Linda on rainy afternoons just like this one. Your mom grew up in this room. Before she forgot what really matters. Do you think she'll hate me? The question came out small and scared. For getting them arrested? I sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside me. Tommy sat, his lanky frame folding into the spot where his mother had once sat for father-daughter talks about homework and boys and dreams for the future. Right now, she probably does. People rarely thank those who hold them accountable. But someday, maybe years from now, she might understand that you saved her from becoming someone even worse than she already was. That's a long time to be hated by your own mom. I know, I acknowledged, because empty reassurances would insult his intelligence. But living with someone else's hatred is easier than living with your own shame. You'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror every morning knowing you did the right thing. Can you imagine how you'd feel if you'd stayed silent and I'd lost everything? Tommy thought about that, his expression gradually clearing. I'd feel like I was just as bad as them. Exactly. Your integrity is worth more than their approval. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, rain pattering against windows, the house settling around us with creaks and groans familiar as breathing. Eventually Tommy unpacked his duffel bag, hanging clothes in the closet that once held his mother's childhood wardrobe, placing his laptop on the desk where she'd done homework decades ago. The circular nature of it felt both poignant and appropriate, as if Dorothy's wisdom had skipped a generation to find fertile ground in her grandson. That evening, I taught Tommy how to make Dorothy's famous meatloaf, the recipe I'd finally mastered through trial and error after her death. We worked side by side in my kitchen, mixing ingredients and sharing stories about the woman who'd shaped us both. Tommy talked about summers when Grandma Dorothy would take him to the hardware stores, teaching him inventory systems and customer service, telling him that honest work was never something to be ashamed of regardless of how much money it made. She used to say that poverty was temporary but integrity was permanent, Tommy recalled, carefully measuring breadcrumbs. That stuck with me, especially lately watching my parents do anything for money. Your grandmother was wise beyond what I ever gave her credit for when she was alive. I slid the meatloaf into the oven, set the timer, and poured us both glasses of lemonade. She would have loved knowing you turned out this way. We ate dinner at my small kitchen table, just the two of us, and for the first time since Dorothy's death, the house didn't feel empty. Tommy told me about school, his friends, his worry about how everything would change now. I listened and offered what comfort I could, knowing that his road ahead would be difficult but confident that he had the character to navigate it. After dinner, while Tommy showered and settled into his new room, I called Philip with updates. He'd already heard from the prosecutor's office about arraignment scheduling. Linda and Brian had both retained expensive defense attorneys, probably the last thing they'd be able to afford before their assets were frozen pending trial. How are you really doing with all this? Philip asked, his concern evident even through the phone. Honestly? Better than I expected. Having Tommy here helps. Gives me purpose beyond just processing betrayal. He's lucky to have you. And you're lucky to have him. Sometimes families break in ways that let them rebuild stronger. After hanging up, I walked past Tommy's closed door, hearing him talking quietly on his phone with a friend, explaining in halting sentences that his parents had been arrested, that he was living with his grandfather now, that everything had changed in the space of a single afternoon. The pain in his voice was real and raw, but underneath it ran a thread of something else. Relief, maybe, or the peculiar peace that comes from knowing you've acted according to your values despite enormous personal cost. I settled into my armchair with one of Dorothy's mystery novels, the one she'd been reading when she died. Outside, rain continued falling on Riverside, washing streets clean, filling gutters with rushing water that would eventually find its way to the river that gave our town its name. Tomorrow would bring arraignments and news coverage and the beginning of a legal process that would stretch months or years. But tonight, my house held safety and integrity and a grandson who'd chosen honor over comfort. Dorothy's photograph watched from the mantel, her smile approving, her eyes holding that expression she got when life unfolded exactly as she'd hoped. "Family takes care of family," she used to say. Not through enabling or protecting from consequences, but through standing witness to both failures and redemptions. The phone rang one more time before bed, an unknown number I almost didn't answer. Linda's voice came through, calling from the county jail, desperate and small in a way I'd never heard before. "Dad, please, you have to fix this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I'm your daughter." I closed my eyes, feeling every one of my 72 years. "You stopped being my daughter when you decided to steal my life's work and fabricate mental illness to justify it. I'll see you in court, Linda." I hung up before she could respond, before guilt could worm its way into my resolve. Tommy appeared in his doorway, having heard my half of the conversation. "Was that Mom?" "Yes. Are you okay?" I looked at this boy who'd saved me, who'd sacrificed everything to do what was right, and felt something settle into place. "I'm okay, Tommy. We're both going to be okay." He nodded and retreated to his room, leaving me alone with ghosts and choices and the certain knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, in this moment, justice was being served and integrity was being preserved, and sometimes that had to be enough. The courthouse steps gleamed wet from overnight rain when Philip and I arrived for the arraignment hearing. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like metal flowers seeking sunshine. A reporter recognized me from the photos accompanying the morning's newspaper article. Local business owner's daughter charged an elaborate elder fraud scheme, and started moving in our direction with predatory eagerness. Philip steered me quickly through a side entrance, his hand firm on my elbow. Inside, the hallway buzzed with lawyers and defendants and families caught in various stages of legal crisis. Sandra met us near courtroom 3, her expression grave but determined. The prosecutor agreed to our request. "You won't have to face them directly. You can observe from the gallery, but you're not required to make a statement today." "I need to see this," I told her, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "I need to watch them face what they've done." The courtroom smelled of old wood and fear, decades of justice and injustice soaked into the paneling and worn carpet. We took seats 3 rows back, close enough to see clearly but far enough to maintain emotional distance. Other cases proceeded first, minor infractions and probation violations, the mundane machinery of law grinding through Thursday's docket. Then the bailiff called the case everyone had been waiting for. The State of Ohio versus Linda Marie Bennett Crawford and Brian Thomas Crawford. A side door opened and they entered in orange jumpsuits, wrists shackled, looking nothing like the polished couple who'd tried to manipulate me at Sunset Meadows 2 days ago. Linda's hair hung limp and unwashed, her face bare of the makeup she usually applied with precision. Brian's expensive haircut looked ridiculous above institutional orange, his usual confidence replaced by hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. They shuffled to the defense table where 2 attorneys in expensive suits waited, probably costing them whatever remained in their drained accounts. Linda's eyes swept the gallery and found me. The look she gave me held such raw hatred that I actually flinched. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear but could easily imagine. "How could you do this to me? How could you destroy your own daughter?" As if I were the betrayer, as if self-defense against theft somehow made me the villain in our family tragedy. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that suggested she'd presided over too many family destruction cases to be shocked by another. She reviewed the charges with clinical efficiency, her voice carrying across the courtroom with practiced authority. Elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft, forgery of medical documents. Each charge landed like a hammer blow, and I watched Linda's face crumble incrementally with every word. "How do the defendants plead?" the judge asked after outlining the allegations. Linda's attorney stood, his voice smooth with practiced defense rhetoric. Not guilty, Your Honor. My client maintains these charges stem from a family misunderstanding that has been blown entirely out of proportion. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Janet Reeves whom Sandra had assured me was relentless, rose with a thick file of evidence. Your Honor, the state has audio recordings of the defendants planning this fraud in explicit detail, forged medical documents, fraudulent intake paperwork, and testimony from a minor witness who exposed the scheme at considerable personal risk. This goes far beyond misunderstanding into calculated criminal conspiracy. Judge Morrison adjusted her reading glasses and scanned the preliminary evidence. Bail recommendations? Janet didn't hesitate. The state requests no bail. These defendants have significant debt and every incentive to flee jurisdiction. They attempted to steal over $2 million from the victim, demonstrating both sophistication and complete disregard for family welfare. Linda's attorney protested vigorously, arguing about community ties and presumption of innocence, but Judge Morrison cut him off with a gesture. Given the severity of charges and the flight risk assessment, bail is denied. Defendants will remain in county custody pending trial. Preliminary hearing is set for 3 weeks from today. The gavel's crack echoed like a gunshot. Linda made a sound between a sob and a scream, turning toward me with desperate pleading. Dad, please, you can't let them do this. I'm your daughter. Tell them this is all wrong. I sat frozen, unable to respond, unable to offer the rescue she demanded. The bailiff moved to escort them back to holding, and Brian finally looked at me directly. His expression held no remorse, only calculation, as if he were already planning his next manipulation strategy, his next angle to work. They disappeared through the side door, and the courtroom moved on to the next case as if my family's destruction were just another Thursday morning agenda item. Sandra touched my arm gently. You did well. I know that wasn't easy. Outside, reporters ambushed us on the courthouse steps despite Philip's attempts to shield me. Mr. Bennett, how do you feel about your daughter being denied bail? Do you have any comment on the charges? Will you testify against your own child? I have complete faith in the justice system, I managed, the words coming out stronger than I felt. My daughter made choices that harmed not just me but potentially other vulnerable seniors. I hope she uses this time to reflect on those choices. Philip guided me to his car while Sandra ran interference with the press. The drive back to my house passed in silence, both of us processing what we'd witnessed. When he pulled into my driveway, George Martinez was tending his Buick across the street, pretending not to watch while obviously dying of curiosity about all the police activity and news coverage. You want company for a while? Philip offered. Or would you rather be alone? Tommy gets home from school in an hour. I'll be fine until then. After Philip left, I sat in my living room staring at family photographs that now felt like archaeological artifacts from a civilization that no longer existed. Linda at 5, gap-toothed and grinning. Linda at 10, posing with her science fair project. Linda at 18, heading off to college with dreams of business success. At what point had ambition curdled into greed? When had she started seeing her father as an asset to liquidate rather than a person to love? The front door opened at 3:40, Tommy's key scraping in the new lock. He dropped his backpack in the entryway and found me still sitting with the photographs spread across the coffee table like evidence at a trial. How did it go? Bail denied. They'll stay in jail until trial. Tommy sat beside me, studying the pictures of his mother's progression from innocent child to incarcerated adult. Kids at school saw the news. Everyone kept asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. What did you tell them? That my parents made mistakes and now they have to face consequences. Tommy picked up a photo of Linda at his current age, 16 and full of possibilities. Do you think she was always like this? Or did something change her? I considered the question carefully, wanting to give him honest complexity rather than simple answers. Your mother was raised with strong values. Your grandmother and I taught her about integrity and hard work. But somewhere along the way, probably when she married your father, she started measuring success by money instead of character. Once that shift happens, it's hard to find your way back. Dad always talked about winning and losing, like life was just a competition to accumulate more than other people. Tommy's voice carried understanding beyond his years. I think Mom got caught up in that worldview until she forgot everything else. The phone rang, breaking our contemplative silence. I answered to find Detective Moreno on the line. Mr. Bennett, we've completed our investigation of Dr. Patterson. His medical records show he's been accepting payments to provide fraudulent assessments for at least 7 other families. Your case broke open something much larger. 7 other families? The number staggered me. How many elderly people had Patterson helped exploit for profit? We're reaching out to all of them now. Your courage in coming forward may have saved others from similar fraud. Sarah's voice carried genuine respect. I wanted you to know that your decision to prosecute is having ripples beyond just your family situation. After disconnecting, I shared the news with Tommy. His expression shifted from surprise to something like vindication. So if you'd stayed quiet, 7 more families might have gotten scammed by Patterson? At least 7 that we know of. Probably more we'll never discover. Then Mom and Dad being arrested maybe stopped other people from getting hurt. Tommy worked through this logic slowly, finding comfort in the idea that our family's destruction might have prevented additional harm. That makes it feel less pointless somehow. We spent the evening working on Tommy's homework at the kitchen table, falling into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. He struggled with algebra while I struggled to remember enough mathematics to be helpful, both of us laughing at my outdated methods. Around 7, I taught him how to make Dorothy's chicken soup, the recipe she'd used whenever anyone in our family felt sick or sad or uncertain about the future. Grandma made this for me when I was little and had the flu, Tommy remembered, carefully dicing carrots with improving knife skills. She said it was magic soup because it could cure anything from sniffles to broken hearts. Your grandmother believed strongly in the healing power of good food in better company. I added seasonings Dorothy had taught me to balance by taste rather than measurement. She would make a huge pot and deliver bowls to neighbors who were struggling, never making a big production out of kindness. Mom used to do that too, before. Tommy's voice carried loss for the mother he'd known before greed transformed her. She volunteered at the food bank and donated to the animal shelter. When did she stop being that person? Probably when your father's business collapsed and desperation set in. Fear makes people do things they never imagined themselves capable of. I stirred the soup, watching vegetables soften in bubbling broth. But fear is an explanation, not an excuse. Your mother had choices at every step and chose wrong repeatedly. We ate soup and watched a nature documentary about wolves, neither of us mentioning that the program dealt with pack dynamics and what happened when individuals broke social contracts. Tommy fell asleep on the couch around 9, exhausted by the emotional weight of recent days. I covered him with Dorothy's Afghan and let him rest, this boy who'd become the family's moral center when adults had failed. The phone rang at 10:30, far too late for good news. Sandra's name appeared on my caller ID. Harold, I'm sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know. Brian Crawford attempted to contact Tommy through a friend's phone, trying to convince him to recant his testimony. My grip tightened on the receiver. What did he say? The friend recorded the call and brought it to police. Brian told Tommy that families stick together, that he was destroying lives over a simple misunderstanding, that there would be consequences if Tommy testified against his parents. It's witness intimidation, Harold. Criminal charges will be added. Is Tommy safe? Fear spiked through me, sudden protectiveness for this grandson who'd already sacrificed so much. Detective Moreno has arranged increased patrols past your house. We're also filing for a restraining order preventing any contact between Brian, Linda, and Tommy. Sandra's voice carried steel beneath professional calm. They're making this worse for themselves with every move. After hanging up, I checked that all new locks were secure and the security system Philip had insisted on installing was properly activated. Tommy still slept on the couch, unaware that his father had just committed another crime in a desperate attempt to avoid accountability. I sat in my armchair watching him sleep, this child who'd become an adult through necessity, and felt rage burning through my chest at parents who would sacrifice their son's safety for their own freedom. The next morning, over breakfast, I told Tommy about Brian's call. His face went pale, then red with anger. He tried to threaten me into lying. Through your friend Marcus, yes. Tommy, this means you'll need to be extra careful. No talking to anyone connected to your parents, no accepting rides from people you don't know well, no deviating from normal routines without telling me first. Tommy absorbed this with visible effort to maintain composure. They really are willing to destroy everything rather than just accept consequences, aren't they? Desperation makes people dangerous. I reached across the table to grip his hand. But you're not alone in this. I'm here, and so are the police, and Sandra, and Philip. We're all protecting you. School that day was apparently brutal for Tommy based on his exhausted expression when he returned home. Other kids whose parents had read the news updates peppered him with questions ranging from sympathetic to cruel. Someone had spray-painted snitch across his locker, which school administrators were treating as vandalism and possible harassment. Maybe I should transfer to Riverside High, Tommy suggested over dinner that night. Start fresh somewhere people don't know the story. Running away won't make it better, I told him gently. And transferring now, mid-semester, would disrupt your academics right when you need stability most. We'll get through this together. The preliminary hearing 3 weeks later drew even more media attention than the arraignment. Janet Reeves presented evidence methodically, building an airtight case through audio recordings, document analysis, and testimony from banking officials about the Crawfords' debt situation. Tommy took the stand looking terrified but determined, answering questions with quiet honesty that even the defense attorneys couldn't shake. Linda wept throughout Tommy's testimony, whether from genuine remorse or calculated manipulation I couldn't determine. Brian maintained cold silence, his expression suggesting he was mentally somewhere else, perhaps imagining futures that would never materialize now. Judge Morrison ruled that sufficient evidence existed to proceed to trial, scheduled for 4 months out to allow both sides adequate preparation time. As the bailiff led Linda and Brian back to holding, my daughter turned to look at Tommy one final time. The hatred in her expression had transformed into something worse, a kind of erasure, as if she were looking through her son rather than at him, denying his existence as punishment for his testimony. Tommy saw it too. His shoulders slumped slightly as we left the courtroom, and in the car he stared out the window without speaking. Finally, as we pulled into my driveway, he said quietly, "She looked at me like I don't exist anymore." "I know," I acknowledged, because false comfort would dishonor his pain. "Your mother is choosing to see you as an enemy rather than accepting responsibility for her own choices. That's on her, Tommy. Not you. Feels the same either way." His voice cracked. "Feels like I lost both parents because I did the right thing." I came around to his side of the car and pulled him into a fierce hug, this boy who'd become mine through tragedy and courage. "You didn't lose parents. You escaped people who were willing to use family as weapons. There's a difference, even when it doesn't feel like one." That night, I called a family meeting of 2 at my kitchen table. Tommy sat across from me while I pulled out papers I'd been working on with Philip's help. "I want to talk to you about the future. Not just next week or next month, but years ahead." Tommy looked wary, probably expecting more bad news. "I'm 72 years old. I've been thinking about succession planning for the hardware stores, about what happens when I'm gone or unable to manage them anymore." I slid documents across the table. "I want you to be my heir, Tommy. I want you to inherit the business Dorothy and I built, to carry it forward in ways that honor integrity over profit." His eyes widened. "Grandpa, I'm only 16. I don't know anything about running a business. You'll learn. You're smart, you're honest, and you care about people more than money. Those are the qualities that matter most." I tapped the papers between us. "This is a trust document. It puts the stores and properties into a protected trust with you as the sole beneficiary. Your parents can never touch it, no matter what happens legally. Tommy read through the documents slowly, his expression cycling through disbelief, gratitude, and overwhelming responsibility. This is millions of dollars worth of stuff. It's also years of hard work and community relationships and employees who depend on steady leadership. I smiled at his appropriate intimidation. You don't have to decide everything now. Finish high school, maybe get a business degree, work in the stores during summers like you did last year. Learn gradually. But I want you to know that your future is secure, that doing the right thing didn't cost you everything. He cried then, not the bitter tears of betrayal but something closer to relief. Thank you, Grandpa. I'll make you proud. I'll make Grandma proud. You already have, I assured him. Every day you wake up and choose integrity over convenience, you make us both proud. Outside my kitchen window, Riverside settled into evening routines. George Martinez finally abandoned his Buick restoration project for dinner. The Hendersons turned on porch lights against gathering darkness. Normal people living normal lives while my grandson and I rebuilt a family from the ashes of the old one. Dorothy's photograph watched from the mantel, her smile approving this new chapter. She'd always said that family wasn't just about blood but about choosing to show up for each other when everything fell apart. Tommy and I were choosing each other now, building something stronger than what betrayal had destroyed. The trial was still months away. Linda and Brian would face justice or manipulate their way toward lesser sentences. But tonight, in this moment, my house held safety and purpose in a grandson who'd inherited not just my business but the values that had built it. Sometimes that had to be enough. The trial lasted 8 days, spring sunshine streaming through courtroom windows while Janet Reeves systematically dismantled every defense argument Linda and Brian's attorneys constructed. Tommy testified again, more confident this time, his voice steady as he explained the recording, his motivations, his certainty that what his parents planned was wrong. Cross-examination tried to paint him as a confused teenager manipulated by a vindictive grandfather, but Tommy's unshakable composure made those attacks ring hollow. Dr. Patterson had already pleaded guilty to 7 counts of medical fraud, accepting a deal that included testifying against his co-conspirators. His courtroom appearance was devastating for the defense. He described in clinical detail how Brian had approached him, offering $15,000 for a fraudulent cognitive assessment, providing specific symptoms to document, coaching him on language that would withstand legal scrutiny. Patterson's testimony removed any possibility that this had been a misunderstanding or a family dispute blown out of proportion. The audio recording played for the jury exactly as it had sounded in my bathroom that night when Tommy first revealed the conspiracy. Brian's voice filled the courtroom, matter-of-fact and calculating, discussing my assets like I was already dead rather than sitting 3 rows back watching my daughter's life implode. Several jurors visibly recoiled when Linda's recorded voice acknowledged the incidents were fabricated, her tone carrying no remorse, only practical concern about legal exposure. Linda took the stand in her own defense, a decision her attorney clearly opposed based on his pained expression. She wept convincingly, claiming fear of her husband, financial desperation, momentary moral lapses driven by panic. But under Janet's cross-examination, the performance crumbled. When asked directly if she'd known the medical assessment was fraudulent, Linda hesitated too long before answering. When asked if she understood that signing those documents would strip me of my autonomy and assets, she tried to claim ignorance that no reasonable person could believe. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict with calm authority. Guilty on all counts for both defendants. Linda collapsed into her attorney's arms, sobbing with theatrical despair. Brian remained motionless, his face blank, already mentally adjusting to a future measured in prison years rather than luxury cars and country club memberships. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Morrison had reviewed victim impact statements, character references, and pre-sentence investigation reports. She looked tired, worn down by another case where family bonds had twisted into weapons. Linda Bennett Crawford and Brian Thomas Crawford, you orchestrated a sophisticated fraud targeting a vulnerable senior citizen who happened to be your father and father-in-law. You fabricated medical conditions, bribed a medical professional, and attempted to steal over $2 million in assets. Your actions demonstrate calculation, not desperation. Remorse, not genuine but performed for leniency. This court sentences each of you to 8 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections, followed by 5 years supervised probation. 8 years. Linda would be 53 when released, her best years consumed by orange jumpsuits and institutional routine. Brian would be 56, his business reputation destroyed, his professional licenses revoked, his future permanently marked by felony convictions. They were led away in shackles, and this time Linda didn't look at me or Tommy, perhaps finally understanding that her choices had consequences no amount of tears could wash away. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. Philip and Sandra guided us through the crowd to where George Martinez waited with his finally restored Buick, offering to drive us home away from media attention. Tommy sat silent in the back seat, processing the finality of watching his parents sentenced to nearly a decade behind bars. That evening, we sat on my back porch watching spring unfold across the neighborhood. Tulips Dorothy had planted years ago were blooming in defiant reds and yellows, proof that beauty persisted even when families shattered. Tommy had been quiet all afternoon, and I gave him space to work through whatever he was feeling. Finally, he spoke. Do you think they'll ever understand why what they did was wrong? Or will they just spend 8 years thinking they're victims? I considered the question carefully. Your mother might eventually find some self-awareness. Prison has a way of forcing people to confront themselves when all the external distractions are stripped away. Your father, I'm less optimistic about. Some people are too invested in their own narratives to ever accept accountability. What happens when they get out? Will they try to contact me? That's 8 years away. You'll be 24, graduated from college, working in the business if that's still what you want. You'll be an adult with the power to decide what relationships you allow in your life. I reached over to squeeze his shoulder. But whatever you decide then, I'll support you. Tommy nodded slowly. I think I'd like to visit Grandma's grave tomorrow. Tell her how everything turned out. The next morning, we drove to Riverside Memorial Cemetery, where Dorothy rested beneath a simple granite headstone surrounded by the oak trees she'd loved. Tommy had brought flowers, bright daisies that reminded me of his grandmother's cheerful practicality. We stood in comfortable silence while birds sang overhead and spring wind rustled new leaves. Hey Grandma, Tommy began, speaking to the stone like she could hear him. Things got pretty crazy after you left. Mom and Dad tried to steal everything from Grandpa, but I stopped them. He paused, swallowing hard. I hope I did what you would have wanted. I hope you're not disappointed that I got my own parents sent to prison. I stepped closer, adding my own message to Dorothy's memory. He saved me, saved the business we built, saved other families from similar fraud, saved his own integrity when it would have been easier to stay silent. You'd be so proud of who he's becoming. We spent an hour at the cemetery, cleaning the headstone, pulling weeds, sharing stories about Dorothy that made us laugh despite the heaviness of recent months. When we finally left, Tommy seemed lighter somehow, unburdened by whatever guilt he'd been carrying about his testimony. Summer arrived, and Tommy began working full-time at the Akron hardware location, learning inventory management and customer service with enthusiasm that reminded me of my younger self. Employees took to him naturally, appreciating his willingness to handle unglamorous tasks without complaint, his genuine interest in learning the business from the ground up. By August, he was managing weekend shifts with confidence that suggested Dorothy's business instincts had skipped a generation to find fertile ground in her grandson. One Saturday evening, closing the store together, Tommy turned to me with unexpected seriousness. Grandpa, do you ever regret it? Turning them in, I mean. Would it have been easier to just let them take the money and avoid all the pain? I thought about Linda's hatred-filled eyes in the courtroom, Brian's cold calculation, the 8-year sentences that would define their middle age. I thought about Tommy's courage, the other families saved from Dr. Patterson's fraud, the integrity preserved through difficult choices. Easier? Absolutely. But easier rarely means right. Your grandmother taught me that comfortable lies destroy more than difficult truths ever could. Tommy smiled, an expression that held both sadness and peace. I'm glad I'm living here instead of with them. Is that terrible? To be relieved your parents are in prison? It's honest, I replied. And honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, is what holds families together when everything else falls apart. We drove home through summer twilight, past houses where families gathered for barbecues and children played in yards, ordinary lives unfolding without conspiracy or betrayal. My house no longer felt empty when we pulled into the driveway. Tommy had transformed it from a shrine to the past into a home preparing for the future. Inside, Dorothy's photograph still watched from the mantel, but now Tommy's school awards hung beside it, his track medals, his Employee of the Month certificate from the hardware store. The house held both memory and momentum, honoring what was lost while building what would come next. That night, before bed, I found Tommy in the kitchen making Dorothy's chicken soup without prompting, following the recipe she'd taught us both. The smell filled the house with comfort and continuity, proof that some legacies survived even when families fractured. You're getting good at that, I observed from the doorway. Figured I should learn all of Grandma's recipes. Someday I'll want to teach them to my own kids. Tommy stirred the pot with careful attention. Tell them about the great-grandmother they never met, about the grandfather who taught me that doing right matters more than being comfortable. She'd love knowing her recipes would continue, I said, voice rough with emotion. She'd love knowing you turned out this way. Outside, Riverside settled into peaceful darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the ongoing work of running 3 hardware stores, supporting Tommy through his final high school years, maintaining the integrity Dorothy and I had valued above profit or convenience. But tonight, standing in my kitchen with my grandson making soup from a recipe that held 4 generations of love, I felt something close to contentment. Justice had been served. Truth had prevailed over manipulation. And family, real family built on integrity rather than obligation, had survived the fire that destroyed everything false. Dorothy would have been proud. More importantly, I was proud. Proud of Tommy's courage, proud of my own willingness to face difficult truth, proud that we'd chosen honor when convenience beckoned. Some legacies are worth fighting for, even when the fight destroys everything you thought you knew about family. Standing in my kitchen with my grandson, surrounded by the smell of soup and the memory of a woman who'd taught us both what mattered most, I understood that we hadn't lost a family. We'd discovered what family truly meant. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.